Christmas lights twinkled mockingly across the living room as Jessica thrust the divorce papers into her husband Ryan's hands, her family erupting into actual applause behind her. But none of them knew the devastating secret that Ryan had kept hidden for 3 years. He wasn't just another mid-level employee at Morrison Industries where they all worked. He owned the entire company. Jessica's cheating had been going on for months with Derek from accounting, the same Derek who stood smirking beside her mother and brothers as they celebrated what they thought was her liberation from a mediocre husband, completely unaware that Ryan's signature appeared on every single one of their paychecks. The divorce papers shook slightly in Ryan's hands as he looked at his wife's triumphant face, at her lover's arrogant grin, at her family's sneering expressions of relief that she was finally trading up. But what would happen when Ryan stopped playing the role of the humble employee and revealed the truth that would shatter everything they thought they knew? What would Derek's face look like when he discovered his promotion had come directly from the man whose wife he'd been sleeping with? And how far would Ryan go to make them all understand exactly what they'd just thrown away on Christmas Day? Ryan Morrison had learned early in life that people revealed their true nature when they thought you had nothing to offer them. His father, the legendary Thomas Morrison, who'd built Morrison Industries from a single manufacturing plant into a Fortune 500 empire, had taught him that lesson deliberately. Money changes how people see you, son, Thomas had said during one of their last conversations before the cancer took him. Sometimes you need to see who they really are when they think you're nobody. So when Ryan inherited the company at 28, 3 months before meeting Jessica at a friend's wedding, he'd made a decision that seemed insane to his board of directors. He would work at his own company under an assumed middle name, living on a modest salary while his fortune sat untouched in accounts managed by his attorneys. Ryan Cole was born, just another guy in product development, driving a 7-year-old Honda, living in a decent but unremarkable apartment. Jessica had been radiant that night, her auburn hair catching the reception lights as she laughed with bridesmaids. She worked in Morrison Industries' marketing department, she told him, and she had ambitions, big ones. Ryan, introducing himself as Ryan Cole from product development, had been charmed by her drive, her intelligence, her seemingly genuine smile. They dated for 8 months before he proposed, and she said yes without hesitation. "I don't need some rich guy," she told him once, early in their relationship, her head on his chest in his modest bedroom. "I just need someone real. Someone who works hard and treats me right. Derek Thompson from accounting keeps asking me out, flashing his new BMW and his expensive watch. But that's not what matters to me. You're what matters." Ryan had believed her completely. He'd almost told her the truth a dozen times during their engagement, but something always stopped him. Maybe it was his father's voice in his head. Maybe it was the way Jessica occasionally mentioned colleagues who'd married up or settled for less. Small comments easily dismissed, but they accumulated like dust in corners. They'd married in a simple ceremony. Jessica's family had attended, her mother Patricia, her older brother Kyle, her younger brother Mason, and Ryan had noticed their barely concealed disappointment. Patricia's thin smile when she'd seen the venue, a nice but not luxurious hotel ballroom. Kyle's assessment of Ryan's suit, off the rack instead of tailored. Mason's comment about hoping Ryan would step up his game now that he was a married man. "Don't mind them," Jessica had whispered during their first dance. They have high standards. They'll come around when they see how happy we are." But happiness, Ryan learned, was measured differently by different people. For Jessica's family, happiness seemed directly correlated with status symbols and social standing. For Jessica herself, Ryan began to suspect, happiness was something that shifted based on who was watching. The first year of marriage had been good, or so Ryan had thought. He'd gotten a promotion to senior product developer, arranged by himself through his proxy on the board, with a modest raise. Jessica had seemed pleased, but there was always something else on the horizon. A bigger apartment, a newer car, vacations to places her friends were posting about on social media. Derek just got promoted to accounting manager, she'd mentioned one evening during their second year of marriage, scrolling through her phone. His girlfriend posted pictures from their trip to Bali. "The resort looks amazing." "We could save up for a trip like that," Ryan had offered, though he could have written a check for a private island without denting his actual wealth. Save up, Jessica had repeated, her tone carrying an edge he'd learned to recognize. Yeah, maybe someday. The distance had grown slowly, like a crack in foundation that spreads invisibly before the whole structure shows damage. Jessica spent more time at work events and team dinners. She'd started dressing differently, wearing outfits that seemed designed for someone else's appreciation. Her phone became a fortress, always face down, always password protected, always triggering a flash of annoyance when Ryan walked into a room while she was texting. Ryan had hired a private investigator, not because he wanted confirmation, but because he needed to know if he was being paranoid. The photos had arrived 6 months ago. Jessica and Derek Thompson, accounting manager, having lunch at restaurants across town. Jessica and Derek leaving a hotel together at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when she'd told Ryan she was visiting her mother. Jessica and Derek in Derek's BMW, her hand on his thigh, both of them laughing. The investigator's report had been thorough. The affair had started 10 months ago, right after Derek's promotion, a promotion Ryan himself had approved, ironically, based on Derek's quarterly performance reports. Derek had been pursuing Jessica for over a year before that, finally succeeding when he'd shown up with his new company car and new salary and new office with a window view. Ryan had spent months deciding what to do: confront her, divorce her quietly, reveal who he really was, and watch her reaction. But something had held him back, some instinct that there was more to learn about the woman he'd married, about the family that had never quite accepted him, about the man who'd stolen his wife with the money Ryan's own company provided. Then came the company Christmas party last week. Morrison Industries always hosted an elaborate celebration, and as Ryan Cole, he'd attended with Jessica like they did every year. But this year, Derek had been there with Jessica's family as his guests. Patricia, Kyle, and Mason, all dressed in their finest, all gravitating toward Derek like planets around a sun. Ryan had watched from across the ballroom as Derek held court, one arm casually draped over Jessica's shoulder in a way that screamed ownership. He'd watched Patricia laugh at Derek's jokes, watched Kyle and Mason treat Derek like he was already family, and he'd heard, because they hadn't bothered to lower their voices enough, their conversation about after Jessica finally dumps the dead weight and New Year, New Life. Ryan's not a bad guy, Jessica had said, her voice carrying across the champagne-fueled noise. He's just limited. Derek, you understand ambition, you understand success. Ryan's perfectly content being ordinary. Derek had kissed her temple right there in the ballroom of Morrison Industries, in the company Ryan owned, surrounded by employees on Ryan's payroll. You deserve extraordinary, babe, always have. That was when Ryan had made his decision. Not out of anger, though anger was certainly present, but out of a cold, clear understanding that his father had been right. Money didn't change how people saw you. It revealed how they'd always seen you and how they'd treat you if circumstances were different. Ryan had spent the last week preparing meticulously. He'd consulted with his attorney, with his HR director, a woman named Helen Carstairs, who was one of 3 people in the company who knew his true identity, and with his accountant. Everything needed to be perfectly legal, perfectly timed, and perfectly devastating. Christmas Eve arrived with snow forecast and holiday music playing in every store. Ryan had come home from work to find Jessica in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear, laughing in that particular way she used to laugh with him. She'd ended the call quickly when she saw him. My mom, she'd said, just coordinating for tomorrow. Right, Ryan had replied. Christmas at your mother's house. Should I bring anything? Jessica's expression had flickered with something, guilt, anticipation, before settling into practiced pleasantness. Just yourself. Mom's handling everything. But Ryan knew the truth. His investigator had provided the final report yesterday. Jessica planned to serve him divorce papers at Christmas dinner in front of her whole family, with Derek present as her support system. It was meant to humiliate him, to demonstrate her moving on to bigger and better things, to celebrate her liberation with the people who'd always thought she'd married beneath her station. Ryan had smiled and kissed her forehead. Sounds perfect. Now standing in Patricia's living room with those divorce papers in his hands and Jessica's family applauding Like this was some kind of victory, Ryan felt an almost surreal calm. The Christmas tree lights blinked in their program sequence. A Nat King Cole song played softly from Patricia's expensive sound system. Purchased, he happened to know, with a bonus from Morrison Industries. The whole scene was so carefully orchestrated, so performed for maximum impact. Jessica stood with her arms crossed, chin raised, looking at him with something between pity and triumph. Derek stood beside her, one hand possessively on her lower back, wearing a smirk that Ryan wanted to photograph for posterity. It would make such an excellent before and after comparison. Patricia stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Ryan, dear, this must be difficult for you, but surely you can see that Jessica needs more than what you've been able to provide. Derek here, she gestured toward him like presenting a prize. He's going places. Accounting manager at only 32, company car, excellent salary. He can give Jessica the life she deserves. Kyle nodded sagely, his arm around his girlfriend Amanda's shoulders. No hard feelings, man. Sometimes things just don't work out. You're a decent guy, just not, not ambitious enough for our family standards. Mason, the youngest at 26, raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. Here's to Jess finally trading up. About time, sis. Ryan looked down at the papers again. Jessica's signature was already there, bold and confident. All that was needed was his signature, and this marriage, this experiment in seeing who people really were, would be over. You know what the funny thing is? Ryan said quietly, his voice cutting through their celebration. I actually thought about telling you all the truth so many times, but my dad used to say that you can't really know someone until you see how they treat you when they think you have nothing to offer. Jessica's brow furrowed slightly. Ryan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We've grown apart. It happens. Sign the papers and we can both move on. Oh, I'll sign them, Ryan assured her. He pulled out his phone, ignoring the confused glances. But first, I think we need a few more people here for this moment. You've invited your whole family and your Derek. Seems only fair I have some representation too. He dialed Helen Carstairs directly. Helen, it's Ryan Morrison. I'm at 2847 Elmwood Drive. Could you please bring the files we discussed and call James Patterson at legal? We're doing this tonight. He paused, watching the blood drain from Derek's face at the mention of James Patterson. Everyone at Morrison Industries knew Patterson was the company's chief legal counsel, someone who only dealt directly with executive leadership. Yes, Christmas Day. I'll make it worth everyone's overtime. What are you doing? Jessica demanded, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Ryan Morrison? You said Ryan Cole. Why did you say Morrison? Ryan pocketed his phone and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Because Morrison is my real last name, Jessica. Morrison, as in Thomas Morrison, who founded Morrison Industries. As in the Morrison building where you've worked for the last 6 years. As in the Morrison who signs off on every hire, every promotion, every bonus, and every termination. The room had gone completely silent. Even the Christmas music seemed to fade into background noise as Ryan's words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Derek's face had transitioned from smirking confidence through confusion and was now arriving at a pale, horrified understanding. That's not... You can't be... Can't be what? Ryan asked pleasantly. Can't be the owner and CEO of Morrison Industries? The company where you work, Derek? Where you got your recent promotion to accounting manager based on what I'm now realizing were probably inflated performance reports because you were sleeping with my wife? Jessica stumbled backward, her hand gripping the back of a chair for support. No, you're lying. You're just Ryan Cole. You work in product development. You drive a Honda. You live in a modest apartment, yes, Ryan finished. I chose to live that way, to work under my middle name, to see what kind of person I'd married without the complication of wealth influencing everything. He gestured around the room. Looks like I got my answer tonight, didn't I? Patricia's hand had fluttered to her throat, her face cycling through expressions, like someone trying on masks that no longer fit. Kyle had gone rigid, Amanda staring at him with dawning realization of something. Mason's beer bottle hung forgotten in his hand, foam dripping onto Patricia's carpet. You should know, Ryan continued conversationally, that I've spent the last few months preparing for this moment very carefully. See, Jessica, when you serve someone divorce papers on Christmas Day in front of their entire family as a power move, you should probably make sure you actually have the power. The doorbell rang, sharp and clear in the stunned silence. Ryan walked past his frozen wife, past her shell-shocked family, past Derek, who looked like he might actually be sick, and opened the door. Helen Carstairs stood there in an elegant coat, carrying a leather briefcase with James Patterson beside her. Both of them looked appropriately serious for a Christmas Day summons from their actual boss. Mr. Morrison, Helen said formally, stepping inside, we have the documentation you requested. Helen, James, thank you for coming on Christmas. Ryan gestured to the living room. I believe you all know everyone here. Helen Carstairs, Director of Human Resources. James Patterson, Chief Legal Counsel. They're two of the three people at Morrison Industries who know that Ryan Morrison and Ryan Cole are the same person. Helen set her briefcase on Patricia's coffee table with a decisive click. Sir, before we proceed, I need to confirm you're voluntarily revealing your identity and terminating the confidentiality arrangement you've maintained for the past 6 years? I am, Ryan confirmed. I think the experiment has reached its natural conclusion. James Patterson pulled out a folder, his expression professionally neutral. Mr. Morrison, we've prepared the documents as you requested. However, I'm obligated to inform you that the actions you're contemplating may what, James? May hurt people's feelings. Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I appreciate your concern, but I think my feelings were pretty thoroughly trampled when my wife of 3 years filed for divorce on Christmas Day, specifically to humiliate me in front of her family. So let's proceed. He turned back to the room where Jessica had sunk onto the couch, her face in her hands. Derek stood frozen by the fireplace. All his swagger evaporated. Patricia, Kyle, and Mason clustered together like survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to each other as their world rearranged itself around them. Here's what's going to happen, Ryan said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been making billion-dollar decisions, while they thought he was just another cubicle worker. Jessica, I'll sign your divorce papers. You want out? You're out. No contest. Clean split. You'll get what's legally required for a 3-year marriage in this state, which, he glanced at James, amounts to essentially nothing since we had a prenup that you signed without reading because you thought I was just a nobody with nothing worth protecting. Jessica's head snapped up. Prenup? I don't remember. Page 47 of our marriage license paperwork, James supplied helpfully. Standard boilerplate protection of premarital assets. Your attorney at the time advised you it was fine to sign since Mr. Morrison, identifying himself as Ryan Cole at the time, appeared to have minimal assets. Ironically, it's one of the most ironclad prenups I've ever seen because it protects approximately $800 million in personal wealth. The number hung in the air like a bomb blast. Jessica's mother actually gasped audibly. 800, Jessica whispered. Million? Give or take, Ryan confirmed. The stock portfolio fluctuates. Now, Derek. He turned his attention to the man who'd been sleeping with his wife. Derek Thompson, accounting manager, company car, nice office, salary of, what is it now, Helen? Helen consulted her tablet. $147,000 annually, plus benefits and performance bonuses. Right. All provided by me, through my company, the company where you've been having sex with my wife, in hotels paid for, with expense accounts I ultimately authorize. Ryan smiled that terrible smile again. I have a question, Derek. When you got your promotion 6 months ago, did you actually believe it was because you were good at your job? Or did some part of you suspect that maybe, just maybe, you got it because someone was helping you along? Derek's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I'll answer for you, Ryan said. You got the promotion because your performance reports were actually quite good. You're decent at your job, Derek. Not exceptional, but decent. Under normal circumstances, you probably would have made manager in another year or two. But Jessica started sleeping with you right after you got the promotion, didn't she? Because suddenly you had the status symbols she cared about. The car, the salary, the office. Ryan, please, Jessica tried, tears streaming down her face now. I didn't know. I never knew. If I'd known who you really were, then you would have acted completely differently, Ryan finished. Yes, Jessica, I know. That's exactly the point. That's what I learned about you tonight. About all of you. His gaze swept across her family. Patricia, you work in Morrison Industries' HR department. Kyle, you're in facilities management. Mason, you're in IT support. All of you have jobs at my company. All of you have been cashing paychecks with my signature on them, indirectly but still mine, while treating me like I was beneath your family's standards. Patricia found her voice thin and trembling. We didn't. How were we supposed to know? You weren't, Ryan said flatly. That was the entire point. I wanted to see who you all really were without wealth coloring your perception. And you showed me, crystal clear. He turned back to Helen. The severance packages we discussed? Helen pulled out several envelopes. Prepared as requested, Mr. Morrison. Standard severance for all 4 employees, based on their years of service and positions. You're firing us? Kyle asked, his voice breaking. On Christmas? I'm not firing you, Ryan corrected. I'm offering you a choice. Helen, please explain. Helen straightened, her professional mask firmly in place. Per Mr. Morrison's instructions, each of you is being offered a severance package equivalent to 6 months' salary, plus accumulated vacation pay, plus continued health benefits for 90 days. In exchange, you'll resign from Morrison Industries, effective immediately, and sign a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding this evening's events. Alternatively, you may continue your employment, but you'll report to new supervisors under restructured departments with modified responsibilities. Those modified responsibilities will be, she paused delicately, significantly reduced from your current positions. That's blackmail, Mason protested weakly. No, James Patterson interjected. That's a legitimate business restructuring combined with a generous severance offer. Mr. Morrison is well within his rights as CEO to reorganize his company however he sees fit. The severance packages are entirely optional and frankly quite generous given the circumstances. Ryan watched them process this. Watched the calculations happening behind their eyes. Stay and be humiliated daily, working beneath people who would know exactly what had happened tonight? Or take the money and walk away, but lose their jobs right after Christmas? Derek, Ryan continued, turning back to the accounting manager, you have a slightly different situation. See, I pulled your expense reports from the last year. 4 hotel rooms charged to Morrison Industries accounts. Hotels where my investigator photographed you and Jessica. That's misuse of company funds, Derek. That's a fireable offense without severance. In fact, that's potentially criminal fraud. Derek's face had gone from pale to green. I can explain. I'm sure you can. But here's the thing. I don't want to hear it. What I want is for you to resign, effective immediately, forfeiting all claims to severance or benefits. In exchange, I won't press charges for expense account fraud. You walk away with nothing but your freedom and whatever's in your personal bank account. Oh, and Derek, that BMW you're so proud of? That's a company car. Keys on the table before you leave. Derek's hand instinctively went to his pocket where his car keys rested. His entire identity for the past 6 months, the thing that had helped him seduce Jessica away from her marriage, was about to be repossessed. This is insane, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. You can't destroy everyone's lives because I made a mistake. A mistake, Ryan repeated. Jessica, you had an affair for nearly a year. You planned this entire Christmas Day ambush specifically to humiliate me. You brought your entire family and your lover to watch you demolish our marriage as entertainment, and you did it all while thinking I was someone with no power, no recourse, no ability to fight back. He shook his head. I'm not destroying your lives. I'm removing my financial support from people who've shown me exactly how they treat someone they think is beneath them. He pulled out a pen, a Mont Blanc that had been his father's, expensive enough to buy Derek's former BMW, and signed the divorce papers with a flourish. There. You're free, Jessica. Free to find someone who meets your standards. Someone with status and money and all the things that apparently matter more than loyalty or love or basic human decency. Jessica took the papers with shaking hands, mascara streaking her face. I loved you, she whispered. No, Ryan said gently. You love the idea of me being more than I appeared to be. You just didn't realize I already was. You loved the fantasy while cheating on the reality. He glanced at his watch, a Timex he'd worn throughout their marriage, while a Patek Philippe sat in a safe deposit box. It's almost midnight. Christmas Day is almost over. Helen, James, can you please ensure everyone here signs the appropriate paperwork? The next 30 minutes passed in a surreal haze of signatures and tears. Patricia, Kyle, and Mason all took the severance packages, their faces reflecting the death of their smugness from earlier in the evening. Derek signed his resignation with trembling hands and placed his BMW keys on the coffee table with a click that sounded like a cell door closing. Jessica sat motionless, the divorce papers clutched in her lap, staring at nothing. When it was done, Helen and James packed up their briefcases. "Mr. Morrison," Helen said quietly, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this." "Don't be," Ryan replied. "This is the best Christmas gift I could have given myself. Clarity." After his employees left, Ryan looked around the living room one final time. The Christmas tree lights still blinked cheerfully. The Nat King Cole song had long since ended, replaced by silence broken only by occasional sniffles. These people who'd been celebrating his humiliation an hour ago now looked like survivors of a natural disaster, shell-shocked and diminished. "I want you all to understand something," Ryan said. "I didn't do this out of cruelty. I did this because you needed to learn the same lesson my father taught me. How you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you reveals who you really are. Tonight, all of you showed me exactly who you are, and I'm choosing to remove myself from your lives accordingly." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Derek, that promotion you're going to put on your resume when you look for a new job, I'd leave it off, because when potential employers call Morrison Industries for a reference, they're going to hear a very different story than the one you tell. Just some friendly advice." Ryan stepped out into the Christmas night. Snow had started falling, fat flakes drifting down through streetlight halos. His Honda, his chosen Honda, not a necessity but a deliberate disguise, sat at the curb waiting for him. Tomorrow he might start driving the Tesla that sat in his private garage. Or maybe he'd keep the Honda a while longer. There was something liberating about the choice being entirely his own now. His phone buzzed, a text from Helen. "Sir, if you need anything at all, I'm available. What you did tonight took courage. Your father would have been proud." Ryan smiled, a real smile this time, and typed back, "Thank you, Helen. Merry Christmas." As he drove away from Patricia's house, away from the wreckage of his marriage and the exposure of people's true natures, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years: freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. The freedom that comes from stripping away pretense and seeing reality clearly. Behind him, in that living room decorated for a celebration that had turned into a reckoning, Jessica sat holding divorce papers from a man she'd never really known. A man she'd betrayed because he seemed ordinary, because he seemed safe, because he seemed like someone whose heart could be broken without consequence. She'd been wrong about all of it. And now, as her family silently gathered their things, and Derek called an Uber because his BMW was no longer his, Jessica understood with devastating clarity what she'd actually lost tonight. Not just a marriage, not just financial security, but the love of a man who'd been wealthy enough to give her anything, but who'd valued her authenticity more than her ambition. A man who'd tested her without her knowing and watched her fail every single test. The divorce papers in her hands weren't just the end of a marriage. They were a report card showing exactly what she valued, exactly who she was when she thought no one important was watching. And she'd failed, spectacularly, on Christmas Day in front of everyone who mattered to her. As Ryan drove through the snowy night toward his real apartment, the penthouse downtown that no one from his other life knew about, he thought about his father's last words to him. "Sometimes, son, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the truth about the people around you, even when that truth hurts." Tonight, he'd given himself that gift, and tomorrow, when the shock wore off and the reality settled in, everyone in that living room would understand exactly what they'd thrown away. Ryan turned on the radio. Silent Night played softly as snowflakes danced in his headlights. He sang along, his voice steady and calm, driving toward a future that was entirely his own again. Somewhere behind him, Jessica was probably crying. Derek was probably panicking. Patricia, Kyle, and Mason were probably arguing about whose fault this was. But Ryan? Ryan was finally, truly free. And that was worth more than all the money in his accounts, all the power in his position, all the revenge he could have taken but didn't need to. Because the best revenge he'd learned wasn't destroying them. It was simply walking away and letting them destroy themselves with their own shallow values and broken choices. The snow fell heavier now, covering the city in white. A fresh start, a clean slate. Ryan smiled and drove on into his new life, leaving the old one buried under Christmas snow, along with the people who'd never deserved to be part of his real story anyway.